Subtitles in video games have been staples of the industry ever since their inception. It's a system that companies use to bring more initial flavor to a game rather than just slapping a number after the franchise name. But where did this trend come from, though? Why, hey, Ducks, I can hear you say, just maybe not in that voice. Isn't it possible that perhaps game developers thought that the naming conventions of slapping a number on the product lowered the amount of potential buyers and therefore set out to create more intricate and alluring naming conventions to change with the times? Perhaps even so, it coincides with games becoming more cinematic and recognized as an art form, and is allowed then to create titles that speak more in volumes and grandeur to allure buyers and critics alike? Or even just that, as with remakes, they want to change the identity of the game with updated graphics, mechanics, and gameplay for a new generation of people who play video games. If Activision were to use a numbered sequel system for the COD series, we'd be up to COD fucking 14. And I don't think COD, any number after 10, is a good look to have for marketing. Nevertheless, it seems that most developers were largely in favor of that numbered sequel system until the past decade or so. In that time, as sequels and even reboots became more frequent, some companies chose to drop the numbers after game titles in favor of some words after the franchise name. Sure, we still had the standard Mario Kart 8, Persona 5, and the such, but more and more franchises adopted subtitles like The Black Knight or 0.2 Birth by Sleep, A Fragmentary Passage. And this whole subtitle spectacle was something to behold, something to love about the games industry. When a new sequel of a game was announced, you'd always hear people talk about what subtitle the developers would use. What words would be there? That would be the #1 discussion thread on all the internet. It kept us up at night theorizing about what subtitles the new Zelda would use as just one example of thousands. Would it just be known as The Legend of Zelda, or would there be a distinctive string of words attached to the end of it? Game hypothesis: why is it Breath of the Wild when the wild can't breathe? Okay, in all seriousness, subtitles do what I mentioned before. They distinguish subsequent game releases from their predecessors in some noteworthy way. Whereas numbered sequels usually indicate a continuation of a certain game series and how it will play, subtitled franchise games usually indicate a change of form, of course, to a certain extent. You still know what you're getting into. If you see Super Mario 3D World, you would expect a 3D platformer, not a Mario-styled FPS. On the other hand, when you get something like Splatoon 2 versus something like Sonic Boom, The Rise of Lyric, you know what you're getting into with Splatoon, as opposed to Son Boom Rise Rick, where you never really know what the hell the game will throw at you. And that's because the game is quite different from Sonic games before it. Plus, subtitles make discussing games so much simpler. Imagine if we had like 4 games called Sonic the Hedgehog. It would make it hard for the average consumer, myself, and more importantly, grandmas, to know how to elegantly talk about them. Recently, however, there seems to be a distinct lack of this glorious system, which only serves to make me sad. One of the obvious reasons why subtitles disappear from following games in a certain franchise is that the non-subtitled games are meant to be quote-unquote reboots. This is logically sound in a way, I suppose. Companies want their rebooted franchises to start anew, so it wouldn't make much sense to plop a number on their title. The only problem then is how people are supposed to differentiate between the reboot and the original, which people usually do by the year the reboot came out in. Sonic the Hedgehog is known as Sonic 06 by basically everyone, but there's gotta be a better way, right? When you talk about Sonic the Hedgehog versus Sonic the Hedgehog, without bringing the year into discussion, it's almost impossible to discern what you're saying. Imagine if I went up to someone in the street and said something like, "Hey man, I really love Doom, you know, the one where I can shoot demons and shit, it's super fun." Most likely they'd say, "Who the fuck are you? Get away from me, loser." But less likely they'd be confused as to which Doom I was referring to. Further confusing are when these reboots get sequels, like the Thief reboot might be getting. Yeah, so now there's going to be 2 Thief 1s and 2 Thief 2s. Will Thief 2 be referred to as Thief 2 20XX or Thief 1 I don't even know. Because without a subtitle, that would just sound silly and be even more confusing. Or what about when Ratchet and Clank 2016 gets a sequel? Will it be referred to as Ratchet and Clank 2016 2 or Ratchet and Clank 2 20XX? It's just super confusing, and a subtitle would really help and be more interesting than just calling it the new Ratchet, the new Doom, or the new Thief. It's like calling the new 3DS the new 3DS. What's next? The new Switch or the new Wii U? It just, I don't know, it doesn't work that well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that we should call certain reboots sequels because that would be silly. Some reboots are entirely different from the source material. Take Prey for example. The 2016 Prey and the 2017 Prey are wholly unrelated except by name. The 2006 version is about a vampiric alien craft sucking the life out of Earth and the protagonist shooting his way through it. Whereas the 2017 Prey is more of a horror Metroidvania style game with an entirely unrelated premise. Still, why not take a page from Sonic? Except, you know, you gotta be careful which ones you're taking from in case you choose the wrong one. And do that system where there could be Prey 2006 and Prey 2017 with some subtitle. For instance, the new Prey could be called, I don't know, Prey Bethesda's Bugs. Ultimately, some subtitles would help drive the distinction and give the game some added flair. Not to mention, subtitles are great for all of us because I can create puns out of them. Hooray. See, what makes this even more confusing is when companies unveil a new project of an existing IP and it doesn't have a subtitle. God of War notoriously did this, leading me to initially question whether this installment is an extension of the story of the third game or something else. Apparently, this game is going to be a soft reboot of the franchise, and it's the 8th game canonically, so it certainly isn't God of War 4, or is it? Maybe that's why you fight Norse gods instead of Greek gods, but the real question that needs to be answered is, when is Kratos going to battle Jesus? Okay, anyways, Sony doesn't say whether or not it's God of War 4 in any press releases or interviews, but fans refer to it as such. So, which is it? Is it really a soft reboot, or is it a sequel, or a sequel reboot, or Not having such a subtitle and just leaving it as God of War is just weird, and if it confuses me, I can only imagine what it does for all of you. You all probably get it, because remember, this is coming from the guy who never learned how to play hopscotch. Maybe hopscotch would be better if it too had a subtitle like Hopscotch, Hopping for Hope, or Hopscotch, Prepare to Die Edition. Following in a similar vein, Sony, why don't I give you an idea for your trouble? How about this? God of War. We all know Kratos is going to die and his son person will become the new God of War. And don't tell me that it's easy to refer to these games with what system they're on, because that just seems super silly to me. Ratchet and Clank PS4 is easy to understand, but what about other reboots that came out on multiple platforms? Regardless, I don't know, I just wish that there was a more fun way to approach referring to these reboots with some subtitles. It would be kind of funny if the new Ratchet and Clank was called something like Ratchet and Clank the Game, the Movie, the Game, since the game is based off of a movie about a game series. Ratchet and Clank is known for its creative titles like Up Your Arsenal and Quest for Booty. So why not sprinkle in a little bit of that creativity here with a subtitle? Something like, I don't know, Stick It in My Ass would be perfect as an example. Same idea goes for Sonic 06. Maybe it should have been called, Sonic the Hedgehog Incomplete, since, you know, the game is about the incomplete god of Soliana Solaris and the whole story is about completing the god's form. Just something else other than the generic Sonic the Hedgehog. When your reboot fails like Sonic 06 did, it only makes the source material look worse because there was an attempt to start anew. Sonic Boom was also a failure, financially speaking. Of course, the game was amazing, but see, that wasn't really a reboot in the same way Doom or Ratchet and Clank are. It was a distinct spin-off, and you could tell that by the subtitle and neckerchief alone, which arguably did less damage to the Sonic brand than 06, considering all the positive excitement around Mania. Star Wars Battlefront 2015 was a reboot without a subtitle, and that shit is already getting a sequel soon. What about the 2 Battlefronts that came before it? I like Star Wars Battlefront, but I don't like Star Wars Battlefront. You see how confusing that is? Can you see it? You can't see it. Maybe you can, I don't know. Can you see words? I don't. Who are Whim? Where am I? The same issue I mentioned before with the Thieves sequel is already coming true with Battlefront. This could have all been avoided with just a simple subtitle or change of name. Though I guess I shouldn't expect something this complicated from DICE, who already have 2 Battlefield 1s technically. As a way to sum up the greatest gaming problem since E.T. on the Atari, I just want something else so reboots can be distinguished from the originals in a creative way. Like I mentioned before, it sounds silly to insert a year or system name to refer to a certain game like this. I don't mind reboots when they're done right, Doom was amazing, but subtitles keep me going. I live, breathe, and sometimes eat subtitles. Games industry, listen to me. Listen to your friend. Please stop confusing me with reboot titles not having any distinction between the originals and themselves. If a game is to be a sequel, then mark it as such and give the game a bit more added flair every once in a harvest moon. Granted, there is the argument that subtitles could be seen as the opposite to this and hurt a game's release by making the title more convoluted, but yeah, I guess that's a good point. Still, I don't think a tiny subtitle here or there would be that bad. Breath of the Wild, The Phantom Pain, Automata, Insane Trilogy, and 4, A Thief's Legacy all benefited from one. These games all sold extremely well, so what's the harm in it? No, please, anyone watching, what's a minor thing in this industry that annoys the hell out of you? Please type an MLA formatted essay below, and I'll be sure to grade it sometime later. And as always, if you disagree or agree with my thoughts on subtitles, please let me know in the comments below. Am I crazy, or have any of you thought similar things? I'm probably crazy, but that's besides the point. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching, and take care. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye, and take care.